Welcome to the official channel of Prosper Anang Ministries. Step into a powerful journey of faith, inspiration, and spiritual growth with Pastor Prosper, a privileged servant of Jesus. As the lead pastor of the New Testament Gospel Church in Benin City, Nigeria, Pastor Prosper is on a global mission to transform lives. He is an author, writer, fluently sharing God's Word, deep, life-changing insights right to your screen. If you are seeking spiritual guidance, a vibrant faith with God, you are in the right place.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. You know, what if the moments in your life where you feel like you are doing absolutely nothing, like just stuck in a waiting room, waiting for a breakthrough, waiting for a change, what if those are actually the moments where you're wielding the most spiritual power?
Right, because we usually picture patience as this incredibly passive, boring experience.
Exactly. You're sitting in a stiff plastic chair, flipping through a magazine from 3 years ago, just staring at a clock on the wall.
Yeah, just enduring the slow tick of the seconds until it is finally your turn. I mean, it feels like the ultimate state of powerlessness.
It really does.
We treat patience like life is just on pause. You know, you're in standby mode until the doctor calls you in, or the traffic clears, or that job offer finally arrives. We inherently view it as a state of inactivity.
Just tolerating a delay. But then you encounter a perspective that completely shatters that waiting room image. Suddenly, patience isn't a plastic chair at all. It is an active battleground.
Oh, absolutely. It becomes less about killing time and far more about, deploying a highly strategic superpower right when the pressure intensifies.
And it completely reframes how we handle adversity. So, that is our mission for today's deep dive. We're exploring a truly fascinating teaching from today's Word for You devotional by Pastor Prosper Anang.
A brilliant text.
It really is. We are specifically looking at a concept he calls the law of addition. And we're diving deep into its fifth building block, which is patience.
And, Pastor Prosper Anang takes a very calm, structural approach to spiritual maturity here. The text operates on the premise that faith is the starting point for growth, which is, it's a standard theological baseline.
Right.
But he introduces this really compelling structural argument. He posits that patience is the crucial load-bearing scaffolding.
Scaffolding. I love that imagery.
Yeah. In this framework, without the specific scaffolding of patience, every other virtue you've managed to build up will simply collapse under its own weight the moment you face a legitimate trial.
Okay, let's unpack that. The devotional roots, this foundational scriptural law, in a passage from 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 7.
Spot on.
And it describes a highly sequential building process. You don't just, magically acquire a mature character overnight. You start with faith, then you add virtue, then knowledge, then self-control, and then, right in the middle of this sequence comes steadfastness, which we translate as patience.
And only after that comes godliness, brotherly affection, and finally, love.
Right. It is a deliberate architecture.
It is. The law of addition doesn't allow for shortcuts. I mean, you cannot leap from foundational faith straight to unconditional love without passing through those intermediate steps.
If we think about that architecture in modern terms, it is like building a skyscraper. Faith is your concrete foundation. You absolutely need it. I mean, nothing stands without a foundation.
No, of course not.
And virtue, knowledge, self-control, those are the lower floors, the lobby, the initial structure that goes up relatively quickly and looks really impressive to passersby.
Right. People see that straight away.
Exactly. But patience. Patience is the internal steel frame. You might not always see it from the outside, but without that steel frame, you simply cannot build higher.
You really can't.
If you try to stack the heavy, complex virtues of godliness and love on top of a structure that lacks the steel frame of patience, the building is going to crush itself under its own weight the moment a storm hits.
The psychology behind this sequence is actually profound. If you look at those earlier virtues in the text, faith, virtue, knowledge, self-control, it is relatively easy for human beings to maintain those behaviors when we are seeing visible, immediate results.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, it is easy to have faith when the circumstances in your life are moving in a positive direction. It's easy to be virtuous when your integrity is being actively rewarded by your peers or your boss.
Yeah, you do the right thing, you get the good outcome. It is a clean, predictable equation, and we love that equation.
We rely on it. But patience is introduced here as the first true stress test in this sequence. It tests whether your foundational faith is genuine or if it is merely outcome dependent.
Outcome-dependent faith, that's a huge concept.
It is. It means a person only believes when they see provision. They only trust the process when the doors swing wide open. But the foundational scriptural law here demands to know what happens in the delay.
Right.
What happens when a person has done everything right, they have prayed, they have acted with self-control, they've applied knowledge, and absolutely nothing shifts in their reality.
That is the terrifying moment, is the void. You expect a reward for your good behavior, and instead you get total silence.
Total silence.
So if passivity is the wrong response, and patience is supposed to be this structural stress test, what does that actually look like when the heat is turned up and the silence just stretches on?
Well, to understand the mechanics of that, the devotional takes us to the original Greek language of the New Testament. The word used for patience or steadfastness in this passage is hypomone.
Hypomone. Wow, it sounds heavy.
It carries a lot of weight. It literally translates to remaining under.
Remaining under.
Yeah, it is not about magically floating above the pressure in some state of detached enlightenment. And it's not about being quickly pushed through the trial to the other side. Hypomone means actively choosing to stay under the weight of a delayed breakthrough.
So it's a conscious choice.
Exactly. It is the conscious refusal to flee or abandon your post when the circumstances refuse to bend to your personal timeline.
Pastor Prosper Anang actually uses the analogy of a pressure cooker for this, which really illustrates the physics of hypomone beautifully. Inside a sealed pressure cooker, the heat doesn't stop and the pressure isn't released.
No, it's intense.
Very intense, almost hostile. But the food sealed inside that vessel isn't destroyed by the pressure, it is refined. Tough, indigestible fibers break down. The chemical composition actually changes.
It becomes tender, thoroughly transformed.
Right. The pressure doesn't ease up, but the object changes within the pressure. But wait, I have to challenge this concept a bit. For you listening to this, isn't there a really fine line here?
What do you mean?
Well, how do we differentiate between remaining under pressure to build structural character and just being completely passive, or worse, surrendering to a toxic, harmful situation? How do you know you aren't just being a doormat and labeling it hypomone?
That is the most critical distinction to make when interpreting this text. Biblical patience, as outlined by the author, is never about victimhood or passive resignation. It is defined as trust in motion.
Trust in motion.
Yes. Remaining under the pressure means you are continuing your assigned kingdom tasks. You are continuing to operate, continuing to obey, and continuing to verbalize faith, even when the circumstances around you look completely dead.
Passivity says, I guess this is just my life now, I give up.
Right, I will just take the abuse. But hypomone says, I am holding this ground, I am maintaining my internal standard, and I am doing the work, even though the external reality hasn't caught up yet.
So it is really about which reality you allow to govern your mind.
Precisely that. To anchor this, the text quotes Romans chapter 5, verses 3 and 4, where the Apostle Paul writes that we glory in sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope.
It is an active production line.
It is.
The suffering isn't just a random event happening to you. The pressure cooker is producing a specific structural material for you. But how do you actually keep moving forward when nothing around you is changing? The devotional introduces what it calls the apostolic dimension of patience, which sounds, well, incredibly militant.
Very militant.
It implies that you aren't just waiting out a siege, you are advancing under siege.
And Pastor Prosper Anang uses a famous historical and biblical example to illustrate the psychology of this Joshua at the Battle of Jericho.
Oh, that's a brilliant example.
Right. Joshua is tasked with conquering a heavily fortified city. But the strategy he is given isn't to build siege ramps, or starve the city out, or use battering rams. The strategy is to march his entire army around the city walls in total silence once a day for 6 days, and then 7 times on the 7th day.
Think about the actual human experience of that. For you, as a soldier in heavy armor walking in the hot sun, the people on the walls of Jericho are likely mocking you, throwing things.
It would have been brutal.
On paper, it is a humiliating, highly inefficient military strategy. Physically, walking in a circle accomplishes absolutely nothing to break a stone wall. The psychological toll of that delay, of doing something that feels absurd day after day must have been agonizing.
It requires immense mental discipline, and that is the core of this apostolic dimension. It required the patience for Joshua and his army to trust the prescribed method over their human desire for immediate logical action. The text introduces the concept of jurisdictional authority here. In this framework, holding your fire and marching in silence isn't a sign of weakness, it is the ultimate flex of spiritual authority.
How so?
Well, holding jurisdictional authority means that when your bank account is empty, you don't let the reality of that mathematics dictate your emotional state or your belief in your future. You are choosing to govern your own mind and maintain your confession of faith when everyone else in the camp is looking at the walls and discussing defeat.
Wow. Pastor Prosper Anang's PP quote for today's devotional really crystallizes this. I actually want to read the exact quote because it is central to the entire teaching.
Please do.
Pastor Prosper Anang's PP quote for today's devotional is, "Patience is not weakness waiting passively. It is power operating under pressure. Your faith proving itself genuine when the test refuses to end."
Power operating under pressure. That completely dismantles the waiting room analogy we started with.
It shatters it. You aren't sidelined in the waiting room, you are actively operating in the pressure cooker. Okay, conceptually this is powerful. We understand the theory of the pressure cooker, and we understand the discipline of marching around Jericho. But how do we actually translate that into our daily lives?
The practical application.
Right, when the car breaks down on a Tuesday, or the medical test results are delayed, or a major relationship is fractured, the devotional provides a very specific, practical toolkit for this. Let's examine the mechanics of these steps.
The first step in the toolkit is redefining your timeline. We all come to our challenges with a personal deadline. We say, I trust the process, but I really need this resolved by Friday.
Yes, by Friday, please.
But the text reminds readers of a common phrase. God's delays are not God's denials.
We hear that cliche all the time. Delays aren't denials. But let's be fiercely honest. When you are in year 3 of waiting for a breakthrough, it absolutely feels like a denial.
It really does. Hope deferred makes the heart sick.
Surrendering your timeline hurts deeply because it requires surrendering control. How does the author suggest we differentiate between a divine delay and a door that is just permanently shut?
By addressing the underlying anxiety of control. When you impose your timeline on a situation, you turn patience into a countdown timer.
Oh, that's so true.
And a countdown timer breeds panic as the deadline approaches. Surrendering the timeline means accepting that you don't have the blueprint for the skyscraper. You have to consciously ask yourself, where am I trying to rush the construction process? Where have I decided the timing without actually consulting the architect?
That is confronting.
Relinquishing the timeline removes the panic of the ticking clock, allowing you to actually focus on the present moment.
Which brings us directly to the second practical tool, using pressure as prayer. The advice here is to pray into the pressure as your current assignment, rather than just constantly praying to get out of it.
We almost always treat pressure as an unwelcome interruption to our real life. We think, once this financial crisis is over, I can get back to my real purpose. But the text argues that the pressure is the assignment.
So instead of praying, please remove this incredibly difficult boss, you would pray, use this difficult boss to forge my emotional regulation, my steadfastness, and my empathy.
Exactly. You decree your faith not when the circumstances are smooth, but precisely when they are hostile. It is resistance training. You don't ask the gym to make the heavy weights lighter. You use the heavy weights to trigger muscle growth.
I love that.
Yeah.
And if you're going to undergo that level of resistance training, you need to track your progress, which is the third tool documenting the hidden work.
Yes, the author strongly advises keeping a journal during extended seasons of delay. The psychological mechanism here is vital. When you are desperately waiting for an external breakthrough, like a new job or a healed body, you can become completely blind to the internal breakthrough that is being engineered in the background.
The structural steel is being welded together, even if the shiny glass facade hasn't been installed yet.
That's it. If you don't document your shifting mindset, your deepened empathy, or your growing resilience, you will look back and feel like the waiting season was entirely wasted time. Documenting it proves to you that the pressure cooker was highly productive.
This actually brings up a really great opportunity for a small group discussion segment. If you are studying this with a group or even just reflecting on your own, consider these reflection questions. What challenged you most from today's lesson?
That's a brilliant question to start with.
Right. And how can this truth be applied this week? What areas of your life need adjustment in light of the scripture? Which part of the devotional spoke most deeply to you?
Encouraging that personal reflection is so important because it moves the theory into reality. And to maintain that internal environment while the external world is chaotic, the text emphasizes another tool speak life declarations.
Let's get into those. This is about verbally aligning your inner reality with the desired outcome. What does that actually look like for someone sitting in a hospital waiting room or facing a mountain of debt?
It involves verbalizing a truth that supersedes the immediate visual evidence. It is taking your jurisdictional authority over the narrative. The devotional anchors this in Hebrews 10:36, which talks about needing endurance to receive what is promised.
So when the visual evidence says failure, the declaration says, I am being built for capacity.
You are refusing to abort the assignment just because the answer is delayed.
The devotional actually provides 3 specific Speak Life declarations for you to personalize and confess regularly. Speak Life declaration 1 is, I declare that I will not cast away my confidence during this trial. My steadfastness is securing my promise.
That is a powerful affirmation of the foundational scriptural law.
Then Speak Life declaration 2, I declare that the testing of my faith is actively producing patience, and I allow patience to have its perfect work in me.
That aligns perfectly with James chapter 1. You are consciously giving the pressure cooker permission to work.
And Speak Life declaration 3, I declare my jurisdictional authority. External chaos will not dictate my internal peace.
Speaking those out loud is a psychological anchoring technique. It stops the spiral of panic and forces the mind to focus on the structural growth happening beneath the surface.
So if an individual commits to this, if they surrender their timeline, pray into the pressure, document their internal growth, and verbalize their authority, what is the ultimate transformation that occurs? What is the end game of the pressure cooker?
Well, the devotional connects this to the broader biblical picture in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 12. It discusses receiving the crown of life that is promised to those who persevere under trial. What is crucial here is the normalization of trials. It assumes the pressure cooker is a given.
Trials are not an exception in the human experience.
No, they are the standard curriculum.
Everyone ends up in the pressure cooker eventually. You just can't avoid it.
You can't. But patience is the mechanism that transforms a mundane, painful trial into a coronation. Every time you successfully choose hypomone, every time you remain under the pressure without breaking character, you are weaving another thread into that crown of life.
The psychological freedom in that is staggering. Because the ultimate reward of this grueling pressure cooker process isn't just that you finally get the job or the health or the relationship you're waiting for. The ultimate reward is the death of fear.
It is complete emotional and spiritual liberation.
Think about the logic of it. Once you have survived a season where everything went wrong, the delay stretched on for years, the pressure was immense, and yet you maintained your joy, you maintained your integrity, and you held your ground. What can the world possibly threaten you with after that?
Nothing holds leverage over you anymore, because you have proven to yourself and to your circumstances that your trust and your stability are independent of outcomes. When your emotional baseline is no longer tied to whether you get your way by Friday, fear loses its grip entirely.
Yes.
The concept of delay can no longer be used to terrify you, because you have learned how to thrive and build capacity inside the delay.
That is so freeing. And Pastor Prosper Anang actually concludes his devotional with a really heartfelt section. It is Pastor Prosper Anang's prophetic prayer for his global audience. It functions as a personalized spiritual warfare declaration based on these exact principles.
It is a beautiful prophetic way to seal the teaching. If you're listening, just agree with this prayer by faith. Lord, I cancel the spirit of panic in my life. I decree that my current delay is not divine abandonment, but divine reconstruction. I ask for the grace to remain under the pressure until my character can sustain my calling in Jesus' name.
Amen. It specifically targets and cancels the spirit of panic. It rebukes the internal voice that suggests the delay is a sign of divine abandonment.
Yes, it is the imagery of the master craftsman using the chisel. Being chiseled involves friction, it involves pieces of you being chipped away, which never feels good, but it is the only way to form the intended image out of the raw stone.
The author also includes a section for further jurisdictional study, pointing readers to additional scriptures to reinforce this theme of holding ground.
Yes, further jurisdictional study 1 points to Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36, reminding us that endurance is necessary to receive the promise. And further jurisdictional study 2 points to Romans chapter 12, verse 12, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer.
It is all designed to build that internal steel framework, so that when the external pressure hits, the building stands firm. We have unpacked a tremendous amount of structural theory today, drawn directly from today's Word for You devotional.
We really have. We started by examining the law of addition, recognizing that virtues must be built sequentially, and that patience is the load-bearing scaffolding that prevents the whole structure from collapsing.
And we looked at the original Greek concept of hypomone, the active, militant choice to remain under pressure so the pressure cooker can break down our rigid fibers and refine our character.
We analyzed the psychology of Joshua at Jericho, learning what it means to hold jurisdictional authority. We learned how to govern our own minds and advance our internal growth, even when the external strategy feels absurd and the weight feels endless.
We explored the practical toolkit too, the agonizing but necessary process of surrendering our personal deadlines, the paradigm shift of using pressure as our prayer assignment, and the discipline of documenting our hidden growth.
Ultimately, this process yields something far greater than just surviving a hard time. It yields absolute fearlessness, culminating in what the text calls the crown of life.
It completely revolutionizes how a person experiences a difficult season, which leads to a final thought I think everyone listening should consider today.
I want you to mentally isolate the single biggest delay or frustration in your life right now, the exact situation that is making you feel completely stuck, powerless, and trapped in that waiting room.
Yeah, hold that in your mind.
What if that specific delay is not a roadblock keeping you from your intended destiny? What if it is actually the exact custom-designed pressure cooker required to forge the internal steel you will need to sustain that destiny once it finally arrives?
Wow. Because if the building goes up without the steel frame, the weight of the success will just crush you. You are being prepared, not punished.
Exactly. Prepared, not punished.
This entire teaching has been drawn from today's Word for You devotional by Pastor Prosper Anang. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of patience. Keep questioning, keep examining the foundations of your own character, and the next time you find yourself stuck in the waiting room, remember, you aren't just killing time, you are building the frame. Take care, everyone.